Here's a pen. I don't know what you did with the other one of those.
I don't know.
Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for tonight is the wages of neoliberalism. Okay, the show tonight is going to be one where it's just based on a survey primarily of Common Dreams, just stories over the last few days in Common Dreams that reveal the influence, of neoliberalism. In most cases, the baleful influence, of neoliberalism on American society, and politics. So what I'll be doing is presenting, sharing, and quickly commenting on, a whole set of articles. So things are going to be quick tonight, and not so much in depth as I usually do. I'll probably be joined by Dee Pierce, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, in just a minute or two. But for now, I'm going to start with our various articles. So, the first one is about a recent action of the Supreme Court. Let me just check to see that I'm successfully sharing that. Yes, I am. Okay, this one is from Common Dreams. And the headline is, quote, really big, unquote. U.S. Supreme Court ruling against Norfolk Southern seen as a rebuke to corporate impunity. And Dee has arrived. And so I'm going to let her in. Hello, Dee.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing great. This is Dee Pierce.
I'm happy
the
to
host
be here.
of Around the World with Dee and Friends. And she will be joining me tonight to comment on all these articles. So, the first one is, I'm going to give the headline again, quote, really big, U.S. Supreme Court ruling against Norfolk Southern seen as rebuke to corporate impunity. Big business lawyers are, quote, going to be furious with this decision, said one legal expert. This is by Kenny Stansel. It's from June 27, 2023. Opponents of unmitigated corporate power celebrated Tuesday when the U.S. Supreme Court rejected Norfolk Southern's attempt to limit where companies can be sued. So this was a defeat for neoliberalism. In a 5-4 opinion written by Justice Neil Gorsuch and joined by Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Sonia Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. That is a very unusual coalition to form a majority on the court. A very unusual 5-4 opinion for the court.
Mm-hmm.
The High Court ruled that Pennsylvania's consent by registration law requiring an out-of-state firm to answer in the Commonwealth any suits against it in exchange for status as a registered foreign corporation and the benefits that entails, unquote, does not violate the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. Well, that seems very sensible to me. If you want to go into a state and you want to do business there as a foreign corporation, uh, okay, then you should have to answer in the Commonwealth to any suits against it. That's, I mean, that's basic. I'm surprised it was only a 5-4 decision.
Hmm.
This is really big. Slate's Mark Joseph Stern tweeted, big business lawyers are going to be furious with this decision. Sure, because the home corporations are going to have to defend in Pennsylvania any lawsuits against them. Isn't that wonderful? Quote, this is big and in my view good because it allows states to exercise personal jurisdiction over corporations that do business within the state but are incorporated elsewhere, often in a jurisdiction that they deem more favorable to their interests, unquote. Stern continued. So that is a milestone decision. Okay, it's unusual. It's not one that protects the profits of corporations over the people that they do harm to. So it's surprising, okay, that the neoliberals on the court decided things in this way. So many of them, specifically Gorsuch, Thomas, okay, and Alito.
Hmm.
That's really amazing. I wonder what the hell is going on. I would have thought, when I saw the headline at first, I thought, this has got to be John Roberts having his effect on some of the crazies in the court. But evidently, John Roberts was on the other side of this one, which is very, very big.
Mhm.
But anyway, Matt Stoller, Director of Research at the American Economic Liberties Project, he's, by the way, a notable progressive, applauded, okay, the decision. He tweeted a very important decision on corporate power. The Supreme Court says out of state foreign corporations can be sued in states where they do business. I mean, isn't that wonderful? Uh, why don't we have similar arrangements on the national level where if our corporations go into foreign countries, that they can be sued in those states, those nations where they're doing business? Only seems fair to me. 2017, months after being diagnosed with colon cancer, former Norfolk Southern worker uh, by Robert Mallory filed a lawsuit alleging his illness stemmed from workplace exposure to asbestos and other hazardous materials, that the rail carrier failed to provide safety equipment and other resources to ensure he was sufficiently protected on the job.
Mhm.
Although he had never worked in Pennsylvania, he filed his lawsuit in the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas because his attorneys were from the state and he thought he would get the fairest access to justice there. Ashley Keller, the lawyer representing him before the U.S. Supreme Court, said to the Lever in February. Well, I'm not going to go through the whole the thing here because I don't have time with so many other articles to do, but the main point is that this was a decision against the neoliberal interests for change. Okay, normally neoliberal interests put profits over people. Here they were putting a person over the profits, okay, of a large corporation and a notorious one that was responsible for the toxic derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, just recently. Uh, the Norfolk Southerns might say you can only sue in Ohio or Virginia, even if you were injured at your home in Pennsylvania for an accident that took place 5 miles away in Ohio. Uh, so it was a significant case, and it was decided on behalf of the individual who was harmed. and that is very, very good.
Yes, it is. It's a welcome change.
Yes, a welcome change. We don't normally get some relief like that. Moving on to the second piece, we see something entirely different. Let me share that one. That was another Common Dreams one. Uh, Here we are not going to see people over profits. We're going to be seeing instead, if I can find the damn thing, we're going to be seeing profits over people.
Mhm.
This one is called, I think I've successfully shared it, right, Dee?
Yeah.
New reporting on insurance claim denials highlights, quote, scam, unquote, of for profit healthcare. This article is by Jake Johnson, and it's June 28th, 2023. Quote, private insurance companies, including Medicare Advantage plans, are designed to generate profit. How do they do that? Take our money and then they deny our care, unquote. Pair of new stories examining the increasingly common but shadowy U.S. insurance industry practice of refusing to pay for certain treatments drew outrage Wednesday from patient advocates and Medicare for All proponents, who said the reporting further reveals the harms of for profit healthcare. In doing this article, I have to admit to bias. You see the red beret on my head. That means I'm an advocate and supporter of uh, uh, universal health care, Medicare for all, that kind of legislation um, uh, passing. Uh, the investigative panel, ProPublica, focused its attention on the galling secrecy around insurance companies' claim denials, which frequently leave patients with massive medical bills and little clarity as to why their claims were rejected. How often insurance companies say no is a closely held secret, quote unquote. ProPublica's Robin Fields reported. There's nowhere that a consumer or an employer can go to look up all insurers' denial rates, let alone whether a particular company is likely to decline to pay for procedures or drugs that its plans appear to cover. So, what's all this about? It's about profits over people. We see that here. Normally, the law supports them. Normally, the government also supports them. In 2010, regulators were granted expansive authority through the Affordable Care Act to require that insurers provide information on their denials. This data could have meant a sea change in transparency for consumers, but more than a decade later, the federal government has collected only a fraction of what it is entitled to, and what information it has released, experts say, is so crude, inconsistent, and confusing that it's essentially meaningless, unquote. So that's the question. Why isn't the government enforcing its rights to have that particular data? As Kaiser Family Foundation said in the Kaiser Family Foundation Health News in a column last month, declining to pay for patients' treatments is, quote, a handy way for insurers to keep their revenue high, not only their revenue, but their profits, of course. Uh, this was written by Elizabeth Rosenthal, of KFF Health News. And she said, quote, that millions of Americans in the past few years have run into this experience, filing a health insurance claim that once might have been paid immediately, but instead is just as quickly denied, unquote. And then, of course, this article is about how frequently they deny. There's a citation of Wendell Potter here, who, of course, is a strong supporter, of Medicare for All, and is one of the stars of the recent movie, Healing Us, which is the story of Medicare for All efforts, the story of the Red Berets' efforts also to push Medicare for All, and to get Medicare for All. I have to recommend this film to you highly. It is a wonderful film. You will cry during this film. Everyone should go to see it. Quote, that's money left on the table that the insurers keep. With their company's profits booming, the CEOs of the top 7 private health insurance companies in the U.S. took home a combined $335 million in compensation last year. So 7 into 335, is that like 60 million apiece? No, it's not. It's about 45 million apiece, I think, off the top of my head, something like that. Pretty good compensation for the heads of those companies. Anything else I want to say about this article? This is a profits over people article. And we don't know exactly how they do that because we can't get at the underlying data. And of course, this article is a strong endorsement for Medicare for All. Cunningham. So Matthew Cunningham Cook, who's writing for The Lever, opened his piece with the story of Jen Coffey, a former Republican state representative in New Hampshire who, like many GOP faithfuls, believed private insurers could solve a healthcare crisis if they were allowed to do things like sell policies across state lines. But her views were shaken when United Health, her ultra-profitable Medicare Advantage provider, quote, constantly rejected or second-guessed the care options her doctor suggested for her cancer recovery and for a rare and painful secondary disease that had no standard treatment plan, unquote. And so she's changed her opinion, quote, now I've realized that you can't fix or repair the system, unquote, she said to The Lever. Quote, the insurance companies don't offer anything. They serve as a roadblock, unquote. The only way forward, she added, quote, is Medicare for All. And of course, I entirely agree with that myself. So, that instance of profits over people. We move to a third piece here. I'm going very rapidly through these. If you want me to stop on anything, Dee, or you have comments, please do interrupt.
Okay.
The unlimited campaign spending by corporations and billionaires has destroyed democracy. This piece, if I'm not mistaken, is by Tom Hartman. It's an opinion piece from Common Dreams. Yeah, Tom Hartman. June 21st, 2023. So a few days back. Of course, this is one of my pet peeves as well. This is what Dump the Corruption is about. It's about voting against any people who take any big money to get the toxic money out of politics and bring our democracy back. When corporations use their vast wealth to distort or seize control of the political process, they have ceased to operate within the constraints established at their creation. They're in violation of their own corporate charters and should be shuttered or sold off. I couldn't agree more. And that's probably the main point of this article. Back in 2022, I suggested our federal government should spend about one-third of the cost of the Trump tax cuts to buy the three largest oil companies in this country. They then could be run for the public interest, uh, okay, and also prevented from continuing to fund climate change by denial and end their support of toxic Republican politicians. So far, no members of Congress or the administration have picked up on my suggestion, but the people in Maine have a similar idea and they're moving forward with it. 97% of the electric power in Maine is provided by two for-profit corporations, Versant and Central Maine Power. And the profits extracted from Mainers by running these companies doesn't stay in the state or even in the U.S. Versant is owned by NMAX, a company based in Calgary, Canada. CMP's parent company is owned by Iberdrola SA, a Spanish corporation whose largest shareholder is the Qatar Investment Authority, which of course is a Middle Eastern company from Qatar. The simple reality is as long as it's legal for corporations to drop unlimited amounts of money into political campaigns, citizens and good government groups will almost always be blown out of the water. And so Tom goes on, in this vein. I can't go through the whole article once again, but it's a very worthwhile article. It advocates for buying out power companies, for buying out health insurance companies. Well, not even for buying out health insurance companies, but of course, for Medicare for all. There's no need to buy out the health insurance companies. Just pass a Medicare for all bill and drive them out of business. And that's the way to do that. Anything else I want to highlight in this? In the 1819 Supreme Court case, Dartmouth versus Woodward, Chief Justice John Marshall wrote the majority opinion. He didn't mince words. Quote, a corporation is an artificial being, invisible, intangible, and existing only in contemplation of law. Being the mere creature of law, it possesses only these properties which the charter of its creation confers upon it, either expressly or as incidental to its very existence. Quote again, the objects for which a corporation is created are universally such as the government wishes to promote. They are deemed to be beneficial to the country, and this benefit constitutes the consideration, and in most cases, the sole consideration of the grant. What did he mean by the grant? It is the grant of the charter to the corporation to operate as a business. That is a grant. And the payment the corporation or corporations are to make for these grants is to do things beneficial to the country. Of course, we don't see that anymore. Why would a government wish to grant or continue a corporate charter for a company that's openly working against the interests of the community, purely to increase its own profits and the revenues to its CEOs, senior executives, and shareholders? The question came before the Supreme Court in 1978 when the First National Bank of Boston sued Massachusetts Attorney General Francis Bellotti because Massachusetts law forbade the bank from pouring money into a ballot initiative that would have raised personal income taxes on the morbidly rich. Lewis Powell, the author of the infamous corporate call to arms, uh, uh, quote, the Powell memo, unquote, that recommended billionaires and corporations join forces, seize control of schools, universities, media, and state and federal legislatures, was the tie-breaking 5-4 vote. This 5-4 vote basically superseded or repealed what John Marshall had to say in 1819. It went against that. Powell also wrote the main opinion saying corporations are persons and therefore should have the First Amendment rights specified in the Buckley decision 2 years earlier that said that money isn't money, but instead legally qualifies as free speech. Folks, this is profits over people. This is corporations over people. Justice Byron White wrote the main dissent in that case. This is Whizzer White, the most conservative of the justices appointed by John Kennedy. Quote, corporations are artificial entities created by law for the purpose of furthering certain economic goals of the state. It has long been recognized, however, the special status of corporations has placed them in a position to control vast amounts of economic power, which may, if not regulated, dominate not only the economy, but also the very heart of our democracy, the electoral process. So what's happened over these years? Just what Whizzer White said. White argued that corporate power derived from vast amounts of money would, if unconstrained, distort and twist our political system in ways beneficial to the corporation and its elite owners, but detrimental to we the people. Welcome to Citizens United. White also argued, quote, the state need not permit its own creation to consume it. Such expenditures may be viewed as seriously threatening the role of the First Amendment as a guarantor of a free marketplace of ideas, unquote. Of course, White lost the argument to Lewis Powell. White pointed out that Powell's decision turned a century of settled law on its head, quoting the line recited in 3 different Supreme Court cases between 1948 and 1971. I'm not going to go into that. I run out of time for this article. But you get the message. This is profits over people. These were neoliberal decisions rendered by the Supreme Court under the influence, of Lewis Powell. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution is unambiguous, asserting Congress is the first among equals. As I laid out at length on December 29th in an article titled Gorsuch Knows, quote, 3 co-equal branches, quote, is a myth. That clause of the Constitution says the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. This is what I've referred to often as the exceptions clause, in the Constitution. And Congress, in the legislation to lift the debt ceiling that was signed into law by Joe Biden the first week of this month, reached back to that section of the Constitution, asserting their power to do something called court stripping. I think it's actually court jurisdictional stripping, but that's all right. Section 267, Judicial Review. No determination, finding, action, or omission under this title shall be subject to judicial review. That was written into the law using the authority given to Congress under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution. So we can use that to get around what the Supreme Court has to say. We can use that to once again have people over profits. But in order to make that happen, of course, we have to dump the corruption in Congress so that Congress will use jurisdiction stripping to make it clear to the Supreme Court that the Congress is the first among equals. So okay, let me go on to the next piece here. Any comments, Dee?
Oh, I'm just listening. So
I'm glad you like it so far.
I do. I'm interested. It's very interesting.
This is a piece where Shelley Moore Capito, who is the senator from West Virginia, the other senator to Joe Manchin, as I don't think I'm sharing this yet, am I?
No, you're not sharing it yet.
I gotta share it. So let me get to the screen. Share the screen. Oh yeah, this was outrageous. Outrageous. This is another profits over people thing. Another neoliberal thing. As climate crisis intensifies, GOP wants to prohibit Biden from declaring an emergency. Leading the effort is Senator Shelley Moore Capito, an ally of the fossil fuel industry and recipient of big oil campaign cash. This is by Jake Johnson, published today, June 29th, 2023. By the way, June 29th, 2023 is Bonnie's birthday. We have been
Oh, happy birthday, Bonnie.
today. So, Senate Republicans introduced legislation earlier this week that would prohibit President Joe Biden from declaring a national climate emergency as millions across the U.S. shelter indoors to escape scorching heat and toxic pollution from Canadian wildfires, which have been fueled by runaway warming. We, of course, have been seeing this
Mm-hmm.
along the East Coast and Washington today. The air was bad, and people were advised to stay indoors or to wear masks to go outside to filter the bad air. Led by Senator Shelley Moore Capito, a fossil industry ally and ranking member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. That means she's the senior GOP person on that committee. The GOP bill would, quote, prohibit the president from using the three primary statutory authorities available: National Emergencies Act, the Stafford Act, Section 319 of the Public Health Service Act, to declare a national emergency solely on the basis of climate change, unquote, according to a summary released by the Republican senator's office. Now, this is outrage. To me, this is pure outrage. The
It
very
is
earth
outrage.
is threatened by the climate, it's very threatened by climate change. We all see it around us. Okay, and this idiot, who probably doesn't think it's going to affect her because she's too old for it to affect her, wants to prohibit the president from declaring a national emergency in the face of the worst emergency we have ever faced as a nation and will ever face as a nation. This is the epitome of profits over people.
It
This is
is.
the epitome of trying to exempt the corporations of the oil and gas industry from the regulations of the government.
A crime against humanity.
Huh? Sorry?
Like a crime against humanity.
It's a crime against humanity. It is. Representative August Pfluger, a Republican of Texas, another friend of the oil and gas industry, is leading companion legislation in the House. The updated version of the bill, first introduced last year, comes as Biden is facing mounting pressure from environmental groups to use all the power at his disposal to fight the climate crisis as it intensifies extreme weather across the United States and around the world. think I said enough about this piece. I can move on to others. You're getting the point.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans here are entirely putting profits over people, trying
Like
to,
they don't have families themselves. They don't have families. They don't have grandkids. They.
yeah. I mean, I have the same thought. What is wrong with these people? What has happened to their moral sense? I mean, they have profits over people as a replacement for a moral sense and for moral outrage. Corruption has seeped into their very souls. I mean, what the hell is going on with these people? Anyway, on to the next piece. What I'm trying to show you is the weight of all these pieces together. I mean, what's been going on just over the last few days? The kind of nonsense that is going on. Here's some pushback. Title of this article, the headline is "We Need to Declare a Climate Emergency." Deadly heat and toxic smoke envelop the United States. This is by Jake Johnson. It's also today. We can't afford to wait. Climate action now, quote unquote. More than 120 million people across the United States, over a third of the country's population, were living under air quality alerts as of late Wednesday as smoke from hundreds of out of control Canadian wildfires blanketed much of the Northeast and Midwest, temporarily leaving Detroit and Chicago with the most polluted air in the world. The air quality alert in Michigan was extended through Thursday, quote, as weather forecasters expected low-level winds to change direction, potentially resulting in more smoke and reduced visibility as a result of the Canadian wildfires, unquote. The Detroit Free Press noted, on Wednesday. What can we say about this? Here are these senators trying to stop the president from taking action in this case. Isn't that a violation of their oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, domestic and foreign? I mean, these oil companies are domestic enemies of the United States, subjecting the people of the United States to a poisoned atmosphere. And we have these senators defending them instead of the people against the United States. These are the wages of neoliberalism, of believing it, of taking it into your soul, of acting as the agents of neoliberalism.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Glenn Clark, Emergency Center Chief at Corewell Health's Beaumont Hospital in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, that's a very rich suburb of Detroit, said in a statement to the Free Press that his medical center has seen, quote, a significant increase in respiratory complaints over the last week. We've seen both asthma and COPD patients who have been well controlled, presenting with exacerbations requiring an increase in use of asthma medications, including rescue inhalers, unquote, said Clark. Quote, even otherwise healthy individuals have come in complaining of chest of tightness. Okay, I'm not going to go further with this. You're getting the point. Another perfect illustration of the effect of neoliberalism on our society and on our Congress, and the effects of bribing the Congress people. Here is yet another one. I know I'm moving through these fast, yet it's hard to do it fast enough. Why there's a severe shortage of cancer drugs. This piece appeared in Scientific American, and Barney suggested I take a look at it. Why there's a severe shortage of cancer drugs, well, we know. Uh, of the many generic drugs for cancer and ADHD, blood thinners and antibiotics are in short supply, in part because there is little profit in making them. This has been, of course, a long-term problem here in the United States. Little profit in making drugs that are helping people. Why make those drugs? There's little profit in them. It's an explicit case of profits over people. On November 22nd, 3 FDA inspectors arrived at the sprawling Intis Pharmaceuticals plant south, of Ahmedabad, I think I pronounced that correctly, India, and found hundreds of trash bags full of shredded documents tossed into a garbage truck. Over the next 10 days, the inspectors assessed what looked like a systematic effort to conceal quality problems at the plant, which provided more than half of the U.S. supply of generic cisplatin and carboplatin, two cheap drugs used to treat as many as 500,000 new cancer cases every year. But Kaiser Permanente, our very Medicare Advantage provider, uses these drugs frequently in chemotherapy, and it uses generic supplies of these drugs. This may be having an impact on my very healthcare provider. 7 months later, doctors and their patients are facing the unimaginable. In California, Virginia, and everywhere in between, they're being forced into grim contemplation of untested rationing plans for breast, cervical, also bladder, ovarian, lung, testicular, and other cancers. Their decisions are likely to result in preventable deaths. So they're having to ration these drugs. Cisplatin and carboplatin are among scores of drugs in shortage, including 12 other cancer drugs, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder pills, blood thinners, and antibiotics. COVID hangover, supply chain issues, and limited FDA oversight are part of the problem, but the main cause, experts agree, this is a Scientific American article, folks, is the underlying weakness of the generic drug industry. Made mostly overseas, these old but crucial drugs are often sold at a loss or for little profit. Domestic manufacturers have little interest in making them, setting their sights instead on high-priced drugs with plump profit margins. A perfect case, folks, for the government to take over the manufacturing of these drugs. The private sector doesn't want to do it. Quality problems in foreign countries in manufacturing these drugs, or unnecessary dependency on supply chains, the government should take over the manufacture of these drugs. The problem isn't new, and that's particularly infuriating to many clinicians. President Joe Biden, whose son Beau died of an aggressive brain cancer, has focused his cancer moonshot on discovering cures, undoubtedly expensive ones. Indeed, existing brand name cancer drugs often cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. Tell me about it. So what about the thousands of patients today who can't get a drug like cisplatin approved by the FDA in 1978 and costing as little as $6 a dose? It's just insane, said Mark Ratain, a cancer doctor and pharmacologist at the University of Chicago. Quote, your roof is caving in, but you want to build a basketball court in the backyard because your wife is pregnant with twin boys and you want them to be NBA stars when they grow up, unquote. It's just a travesty travesty. This is the level of healthcare in the United States of America right now, said Stephen Bedivers, an oncologist in Hot Springs, Arkansas, who in recent weeks has had to delay or change treatment for numerous bladder, breast, and ovarian cancer patients because his clinic cannot find enough cisplatin and carboplatin. Well, I'm not going to go into any more of the detail of this. I highly recommend this particular article to you. It speaks to the need for Medicare for all, but it also speaks to the need for the government to manufacture drugs that are not profitable for private companies, or it speaks to the need to use existing legislation to force the private companies to produce these things, whether or not they make a profit. Remember, corporations are created by the government to produce public benefit, not just to produce their own profits. Here, these drum companies are refusing to comply with the public benefit part of this, deliberately refusing to produce these medicines that are greatly needed by people for the reason that there is little profit in them, and pursuing profits over people very, very plainly. This is probably one of the best illustrations of that. FDA listed 137 drugs in shortage as of June 13th, including many essential medicines made by few companies. I'm telling you, these things have to be nationalized. Sometimes the charters of these corporations have to be yanked so they know if they don't produce any public benefit, they will cease to exist. That's what we need to do. Next. Here is Kevin McCarthy. Let me share Kevin McCarthy, the new star of the House, after making corrupt deals with the crazy right wing of the Republican Party. Let me see if I got the right one for that. No, this is the wrong one. So let me shift elsewhere. Let me stop sharing this one. Let me find the right one. Sometimes it's hard to find the right one, not because it's not there, but because when you're looking for it, it doesn't have the same title as the original headline, especially when you've got so many of them up there. Let's see if I can. Maybe this is the one. Yes, this is the one. Okay, so here we go. There's a shot, of Kevin McCarthy walking to the House chamber on January 4th, 2023, before I think he had become the Speaker. Voters, including majority of Republicans, opposed McCarthy's ploy to attack Social Security. Quote, voters have a message for Kevin McCarthy, said one critic of the House Speaker's proposed fiscal commission. Quote, hands off Social Security and Medicare. This is by Brett Wilkins, June 28, 2023. House Republicans advance a budget proposal that one leading critic critic warns would destroy Social Security as we know it. Survey published Wednesday showed U.S. voters overwhelmingly opposed the creation of the fiscal commission proposed by Speaker Kevin McCarthy to decide how to gut vital social programs under which 70 million Americans, upon which nearly 70 million Americans rely. Okay, this is actually a report, this article, on a Data for Progress survey. What Data for Progress found that opposition to McCarthy's proposed commission is thoroughly bipartisan, with 72% of all likely voters, including 78% of Democrats, 72% of independents, and 65% of Republicans, either, quote, somewhat, unquote, or, quote, strongly, quote, unquote, opposing the move. In contrast, 93% of survey respondents said Social Security benefits should remain as they are or be expanded, including 94% of Democrats, 91% of independents, and 94% of Republicans. I mean, those figures are really amazing. 94% of Republicans.
And they're ignored.
And we are ignored, Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike. They're not expanding Social Security. Instead, Kevin McCarthy is trying to get a commission to gut Social Security, okay, and Medicare. And by the way, he's lying about his trying to do that. So Nancy Altman, who's president of Social Security Works and has been, of course, forever a Social Security supporter, says, quote, contrary to the claims of Speaker McCarthy and other Republicans, Social Security doesn't contribute a single penny to the national debt. She noted it's fully funded by the contributions of American workers and other dedicated revenue. Indeed, it currently has a $2.8 trillion accumulated surplus. As you know, that accumulated surplus is all on the book of accounts. It is not in any bank. It is not in any sense money yet, but it's recorded as being owed to the Social Security program. Okay, McCarthy's overt attack on Social Security belies his oft-repeated past promise that cuts to the program were off, the table. So when he made that promise, of course, he was lying. He figures that if somehow the commission were to recommend cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and he could get a bipartisan group of senators together to jump off the fiscal cliff together, that he could get Social Security and Medicare cuts. And the people couldn't do anything about it. Why? Because of the toxic two-party system we have right now, where the two parties can join hands for the purpose of implementing profits over people. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. So I'm not going to go further with this article, but you get the point. Let's go on to the next one. Here's another neoliberal. Let me share this piece. Almost inadvertently knocked myself out of this situation. This is about the governor of Maine, in part. Unions furious after Democratic Maine governor, a Democratic governor, vetoes offshore wind bill over fair labor rules. I don't think vetoes has an E in vetoes. I may be mistaken about that. I think that's a misspelling. Janet Mills' ideological opposition to strong labor standards. jeopardizes the build out of this industry and all the economic and community benefits that come with it, unquote, said the leader of the Maine AFL-CIO. This one's by Kenny Stansel, June 28th. But Democrat Maine Governor Janet Mills on Monday vetoed an offshore wind development bill because she opposed an amendment requiring collective bargaining agreements for future projects, drawing condemnation from the state's largest federation of unions. Quote, Maine's climate motto has been, quote, Maine won't wait, unquote. With this veto, Governor Mills is saying, quote, Maine will wait, unquote, for thousands of good jobs, for clean energy, and for the build out of a new industry, unquote. Maine AFL-CIO Executive Director Matt Schlobohm said in a statement, quote, we will wait because the governor is opposed to fair labor standards, which are the industry norm, unquote. This is a Democratic governor, obviously a neoliberal. The governor's ideological opposition to strong labor standards, said by Schlobohm, quote, jeopardizes the build out of this industry and all the climate, economic, and community benefits that come with it, unquote. Mills supported an earlier version of legislative document 1847 that originated from her office. Last week, however, the governor made clear she opposed the addition of an amendment requiring project labor agreements or PLAs, pre-hire deals that are negotiated between the unions and employers that establish wage floors and other conditions for the construction of offshore wind ports as well as the manufacturing of turbines and other components needed for wind energy projects. So I'm not going to go into the various arguments. What I want to point out here is the fact that Janet Mills is a neoliberal, uh, is an ideologue, a neoliberal one, that's stopping progress in Maine's and stopping good jobs by union labor that pay a living wage. And there's someone who claims to be a Democrat who is supporting that, illustrating once again that a belief, okay, in neoliberalism is a bipartisan thing frequently. The Democrats are often just as guilty of it as are the Republicans. Going on to the next article, are you seeing the huge damage, okay, neoliberalism produces yet? Well, if you're not, take a look at this next one. Montana train derailment. Raises fears of similar disasters on proposed Uinta Basin Railway. Stillwater County, Montana Sheriff's Office said it was, quote, a great stroke of luck, unquote, that none of the train cars were carrying oil that would have polluted the Yellowstone River. This is by Julia Conley, June 25th, 2023. A freight train derailment and the collapse of a bridge over the Yellowstone River in Montana on Saturday raised alarm as several cars carrying asphalt and molten sulfur tumbled into the river, prompting officials to take emergency measures at nearby water plants. The incident also brought to mind for some critics the Biden administration's plans to move forward with the railway project along the Colorado River, one that could place the drinking water of 40 million people at risk as trains transport crude oil from eastern Utah's Uinta Basin to national rail lines. The substances that were dumped into the Yellowstone River on Saturday solidified quickly once exposed to the cold water in the river. Stillwater County Emergency Services Chief David Stamey told the New York Times that solidification could limit the potential harmful effects to the environment. Sulfur is commonly used as an insecticide, a fungicide, a rodenticide, and is often used as fertilizers. Anyway, again, profits over people. The infrastructure couldn't support those trains. The infrastructure was weak. The infrastructure is weak and deteriorating all over the country. But they insist on using that infrastructure, the weak infrastructure, to ship toxic materials that can be harmful to the environment. If the Uinta Basin Railway project is approved, it could carry as many as 5 2-mile long crude oil trains more than 100 miles each day alongside the Colorado River's headwaters. That's the impending disaster that we see there. And of course, they'll be running on rails, running on infrastructure that is deteriorating. By the way, Senators Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper and Representative Joe Neguse, the two senators are certainly neoliberals of the first order, told U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg in a letter earlier this year urging him to oppose the project. The public-private alliance between the Uinta Basin Railway appears to have, quote, no plan to mitigate the harm of a potential accident or derailment in Colorado, which could be particularly difficult to address given Colorado's mountainous terrain. So again, profits over people, profits over people. Neoliberal officials approving projects that have no business being approved. Okay, so I'll cover one more, then I think I'll have to stop having illustrated the point.
I think you've illustrated it very well. And for us that have followed things for years, we know, we've seen ourselves that the people are just tossed aside and the profits come first.
Really just amazing, isn't it?
It is. They all lie to get in office, and they represent the
Okay,
corporations.
there's much more to do. I think I'm counting here. How many articles? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 articles left and no time to do them. But what I think I'm going to do is postpone them to next week and maybe add a few more. Okay, and do this again actually next week. It's very instructive how pervasive the profits over people intention is, how little protections are afforded to people, are afforded to the environment, are afforded to the interests of the United States because of now the influence uh,
Okay.
because of the influence of toxic money in politics, because of the donors and their donations that corrupt the senators and the House members all across the country. Okay, we'll take a few comments now. Have you any more comments, Dee?
I think you've done a great job of really illustrating the point.
Well, thank you. I think I'll do it again on Thursday of next week because some of the specifics of these articles, okay, are simply terrific. And Lana says, oh, first Lana says, happy birthday, Bonnie.
Thank you.
And Lana says, my son works outside, said his nose is all stuffed up and he has a cough. We are in Minnesota. Yeah, I know the air has been really bad, okay, in Minnesota coming down from Canada. Kay says, hi, Lana, we've had a smoke problem here in Northeast Ohio, too. Yeah, I'm sure you have. But East Palestine created a problem as well. Andy Candy says, hi, for a few minutes, I'm surprised Trump isn't yelling at Canada to rake their forest floors. Yes, Andy, very well put. Kay says, I think our air goes in your direction most of the time. What a mess. Yeah, it is a mess. And Steve says, re-cancer, take your D3 and K1, okay, and melatonin. We haven't been taking melatonin lately, but we've been taking a lot of D3 and K1. Or actually, it's vitamin K2, I think. Kay says, single payer now. I couldn't agree more. Steve says, smash the like button. Yes, Steve. Steve says, seems like cutting Social Security would be political suicide. What do I know? Well, here's the thing. They have, I think, too much faith, because I think it will be political suicide, but they have too much faith in their ability to bamboozle the public because they have so much money and because they control the big media, okay, the mainstream media. They don't understand that when you harm people directly, not as an abstraction somewhere else in the country, but when the bad air hits everybody, or 120 million people, okay, in the country, those 120 million people are going to look for somebody to blame. And when Social Security gets cut, people are going to be looking for somebody to blame. And you can only stress the political system so far, even if Democrats and Republicans hold hands and make it bipartisan. So they think they can escape the blame because it's bipartisan. We can blame both parties, and we can get a third party over the top so it starts competing with them. And then there's going to be no more holding hands. Kay says, my internet keeps going out, so I'm out of here for tonight. I love you all. We love you, Kay. Good night. Steve Wilbrand says, what kind of human being would want to cut Social Security? People who put profits over people would want to cut Social Security because the donors want to cut Social Security. What kind of people among these donors would want to cut Social Security? All I can say to that is people who are really evil, who don't believe in social safety nets, who believe in people bowing and scraping before the man. That's what this is about. It's about power and subjecting people to the power of the capitalists. That's what this is about. Okay, the big capitalists. So, I think on that note, I'm going to say goodnight, except to say tomorrow night, I'll be back with another Dump the Corruption show. What I'll be doing tomorrow night is talking about the lessons learned from the surveys we've done of the Republican and Democratic House members, okay, and senators. We've learned some lessons there about what the very important parts of the corrupt funding system are, what parts of it are important for everybody. And will draw those lessons for you and draw out their significance for the future of the Dump the Corruption campaign and for our future programs, okay, on Dump the Corruption. So tomorrow night is going to be kind of a climax, okay, before we go on with an intensified campaign that will deal with individual congresspeople, okay, and senators. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you, Dee.
Oh,
And
thank you. I had a good time tonight.
thank you. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Okay,
Yes,
sure you'll have a program at 8 p.m. D.
yes, I will.
Okay, and I will be there for that. And then uh, I'll have my Dump the Corruption program, okay, at 9 p.m.
Okay, and please hit the like button, subscribe, and share. If you already haven't done that, please do.
And please do buy us some coffees. Please buy us some coffees. Remember, these coffees are relatively inexpensive.
But it helps us keep our programs running and everything else.
Okay, it really does. I mean, I've just incurred, okay, a huge repair bill for our very old 1999 Nissan.
Mm.
And it's a bill, okay, I couldn't afford. Okay, I need some help, folks. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow night.
So,
And so, good night.
happy birthday to Bonnie again. Good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Happy birthday, Bonnie.
Thank you.